Hello, everyone. This is Priscilla Steffen. Welcome to the Soulfluent Leadership Podcast Healer Series, Expand Your Freedom. I am so delighted to be sharing with you Lindsay Pera today. Lindsay and I have known each other now 12-ish years, fellow mystics on the path. I felt immediate resonance with Lindsay when we met as kind of soul sisters, and you literally speak like poetry. I don't think I've ever told you that. It's just every word you say, you really combine that very practical, grounded aspect to the very mystical side of us. And today we're going to be talking about all things right livelihood through the path and the lens of being a mystic in this world. Does it take to have and experience right livelihood, navigate chronic illness, motherhood, and all the things that allow us to weave all parts of ourselves, especially the mystic side. And through your beautiful Mystic Society ecosystem and courses and offerings, you do create that home for us mystics to feel safe, understood, seen, very grounded leadership, business, and mystical support and tools, which is so important as well. I have your bio here. Of course, you came from management consulting and very strong business side, to then shifting to living in California from Silicon Valley and wanting a life of more flow with the animals, with the children, with life. So I'd just love for you to share if there's anything else you want to share about your journey as a mystic, starting on a more traditional path and then starting a family with 3 children. And as many of the people that listen to this, to my work, are mystics by design, right? We're here to elevate consciousness through our intuitive, creative, and healing abilities, right? That's my mystic archetype definition. And you're also, of course, the creator of the Mystics Almanac, now in its 6th year, coming in 2024. So welcome, Lindsay, and anything you want to share more about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And yes, I celebrate our anniversaries as well. I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed and that we continue to weave together. You have been a core contributor to the Mystics Almanac for a long time, and also one of the few practitioners that I have brought in to work with my clients over the years in my mastermind. So such a deep respect for the work that you do.
Thank you.
So yes, I grew up in a very traditional household at the base of Sand Hill Page Mill in Silicon Valley. Family very much more on the corporate and academic side than on the intuitive side. But from a really young age, I knew that I sensed and perceived and felt things differently. I had my first intuitive knowings when I was 5 years old. And then I did pretty much my best to tamp down my manifestation skills and my intuitive knowing for about the next 2 decades, very much trying to fit in to my very analytical family's worldview and paradigm, and similarly fit into this world that we live in that didn't, especially at that time, necessarily prioritize the intuitive, the energetic, the emotional literacy side of things. And yet I found myself at a place in a crossroads in my professional life where I was, by every external metric, thriving in terms of my career trajectory, my financial growth, was married and am married to the love of my life, starting a family. But on the inner level, there was a deep distress brewing. Every single day I walked out the door, I heard in my head, in my mind's eye, I could see that what I was doing was killing me on some level, even though I thought that was hyper dramatic and I didn't know what that meant. A type of disconnect, a lack of resonance was building, because what I knew was that I was a bridge walker, and I knew I couldn't ignore anymore that there was this entire other pathway that wasn't being met within me, but also wasn't being met within business and within leadership circles in general. So around that time, I started to resist this inner knowing, and dis-ease grew within me. So like so many who aren't listening to their soul path, I began to get sick. So ultimately, I ended up on a chronic illness path that led me to leaving, well, first going on disability, then leaving my career, as you said, moving down to the Central Coast, and then slowly reemerging in a way that didn't abdicate my prior experience, doesn't try to amputate the fact that I have deep roots in business and a passion for business, but actually allowed for an integration of the intellect and the intuition. I started a boutique consultancy, the Mystic Society, and my purpose on the planet is ultimately to shift resources into the hands of change makers. And as you said, I do that through community. I do that through programs, through the Mystics Path book and its frameworks, and through our annual publication, the Mystics Almanac. And ultimately, it's help people navigate their life, our times in a good way. When we are in resonance, we are in harmonic flow with the universe. When we are out of resonance, everything becomes more challenging. There are 3 transformational levers: our health and relationship and our finances. And these are the ways that disconnect or disharmony or anti-resonance or dissonance, however you want to refer to it, this is how they show up in our life. Maybe like mine, you might have experienced health challenges, or maybe you've experienced relationship fracture or divorce, or maybe you're experiencing under earning or even bankruptcy. Like, these are the things that actually create shift in our lives and have the potential to deliver us to a more aligned place and more aligned to our soul purpose and ultimately our right livelihood. So that's in a nutshell how I came to be doing the work that I do. And ultimately, I'm just grateful to get to be a small part of people's journeys aligning to their true self.
No small feat and no small path for sure. There are so many directions that we could go in. Can you talk a little bit more about right livelihood? I think in your definition of right livelihood, because I remember as you were talking about it for years, and I was like, oh, that sounds like a really nice thing to do, but right now I'm got other priorities. I've got to make all this money. I've got to, all the things. And yet at the core, I think of true fulfillment is right livelihood and understanding what that means and the different, I think there are 3 spokes to it, right? So can you speak to that a little bit and really let's see if we can activate this inner awareness and yearning, I think, in many people now.
Absolutely. It's absolutely one of my favorite topics. One of the things I'm invited to speak about most often, this concept of right livelihood. So to really get a sense of what right livelihood is, we want to take a little bit of a step back. I just mentioned these 3 transformational levers. So our health, our relationships, and our money. Well, those are the ways that we experience life and shift within ourselves as individuals. When we start talking about right livelihood, we're actually talking about that next level, how we are as people, how we start to show up in the world, what our connection is via our work that we do, the people that we connect with or that we serve as clients or coworkers or customers. And then that important piece of the why we're doing what we do in the first place and what comes from it. So if you look at how those 3 transformational levers translate into right livelihood, essentially there are these 3 pillars. So the 3 pillars of right livelihood are soul purpose and path, sacred commerce, and leadership and legacy. So you can see how each of those maps to those transformational levers. Our soul purpose has everything to do with our health and well-being. When we are misaligned from our soul purpose, it shows up in our health. When our health is out of alignment, it shows up in our inability to align to our soul purpose. Similarly, that prosperity piece, right? Money, flow, abundance, earning, that's very much connected to sacred commerce. And then that relational period, that heart, that those connections to people, that has everything to do with how we leave leadership and legacy based on the work that we've done in the world. So those 3 pillars, to identify your soul purpose, to understand sacred commerce, and to stand in your leadership and legacy, ultimately those things put us on a path to be thriving, resonant, and prosperous. So when we are aligned to our right livelihood, we have this feeling for the first time that we're truly thriving, not just in ourselves, but in our soul, that we're resonant, that what we're doing is meeting an audience, that we're having a return on energy, that it's serving some greater good, right? When we're in resonance, we're in flow. We feel like there's meaning behind what we do. And then that leadership and legacy, this idea that if it were all to end tomorrow, we would exit this life, exit this body, exit this world, knowing that we had aligned to what we came in to do in the first place, that there is an element of our being that will live on, that we've left footprints in the sand that others can follow. So when we are really in sync with our right livelihood, we have this feeling that we know where we're on the planet. We're being compensated gloriously from that place, and it's in service to the legacy that we feel called to live. And so this is an ethos, a paradigm, a framework that exists in a lot of traditions around the world. Probably the most famous is the Japanese flower of life, this idea that you can identify what you're here to do and then align that to what you can get compensated for, and then look at how that fits with your heart and an ethos of service, right? There's different ways that this shows up in different cultures, but right livelihood is very much a core element of the mystic's path, and it's certainly a foundational root of the work that I do in the world.
I think that's so beautiful, and thank you for explaining that. And I just this weekend, I put together a little wheel of my own, and noticing how you and I, in our intuitive work, in our way, we create cohesiveness and coherence among the different parts of ourselves, right? Health, the
Yeah.
three transformational levers. And that's, I think, the potency of the work that you do, is that you look at the whole person, right? Right livelihood is looking at the whole. It's a holistic 360 lens at what makes everything work in sync, and feed into and off of. There's that generative flow of one thing giving to the next, and blossoming, really, and in that thriving energy. And I think that's so important, especially for many of us who have felt, either in corporate careers or in traditional, more marketing and business parlance, that we get to just focus on business, and business growth lives in a silo independently of the rest of our lives, of our health. And then we wonder why we're unfulfilled, burned out, craving and longing for more, unhealthy, unwell, and just life doesn't work. I think that's at the core. It's just not working. And usually there are those nudges talking to us, look, it's time to pay attention. Oprah obviously always says, there's the whisper, the nudge,
Yep.
and then there's a brick in the
Scream.
head, right?
Yeah.
And so as we talk about right livelihood, so as we're recording this now, we're in October of 2023, which to me, usually my creative flow and my year, usually in many ways, starts in September. Like,
Mhm.
that's when I begin to really contemplate the year that has passed and really start formulating the year ahead. And as we started talking and thinking about what we were to discuss today, we were talking about, in the Mystic's Almanac, each year has a core theme, energetic expression or imprint, right? 2023 was the year of resonance. And I remember this often as this year was a year of letting go of all the old versions of me, right? So everything that is not part of what's in our highest and best becomes extra illuminated, like amplified, and just it's going, right? And that has been the year for me of money healing and power and sovereignty. And then now we're looking upon 2024, the year of possibilities, right? At least that's how it came across in the records, right? For 2024. So as we're looking now, and you said that 2023 and 24 are twin years of each other, right? So year of resonance and year of possibilities. And as I say that, of course, if there's resonance, if there's flow, of course, in resonance lies the seeds of possibility, I would imagine, right? And of new beginnings, of taking bigger risks, of leaning in further and amplifying hope. So I'd love for you to talk about the bridge between what you've seen both in clients, friends, personally in 2023 and in the collective, and how we can understand and work with the changes that are before us, moving into 2024.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. So 2023, one of the interesting things, having done this tracking process and divination and projection forward for over 5 years now, is we knew when we arrived at 2023 as a collective that there actually were no written in stone answers, that humanity is actually at a tipping point of identifying whether we will move in the direction of collective health and harmony or whether we will continue to create fracture. And so there was really this sense of it could go either way coming out of 2022, which was a year of calibration and balance, into the year of resonance, where, as you said, things that were resonant to us were going to continue to grow and amplify, but things that were not resonant were really going to show themselves. This was a year where, to break down resonance, we use a model on the Mystics Path called the ACAR Model. And essentially it says, well, it's an acronym, ACAR, where the first A is authenticity. The C is congruence. The second A is alignment. And together that produces resonance. So your authentic self, your ability to know who you are, what's real and true, then is influenced and drives how you show up in the world, that congruence piece. Are you showing up congruently in alignment with who your authentic self is, right? Because there's still things we try to keep to ourselves, things that we mask, things that we haven't owned, things that we haven't healed. But as we claim our full authentic self, we then are challenged to show up in the world congruently. As we then begin to experiment showing up in the world congruently, we have to ask ourselves, to what are we aligned? To what industry, maybe, to what clients, to what audience, to what job, career, purpose, relationship. So this sequence of authenticity, congruence, and alignment is what produces our resonance. And when those things are working well and aligned, we attract more of the goodness that we desire. We have flow, we have opportunity, we have prosperity. When we start bumping into walls or challenges or recurring misfortune or recurring patterns that don't serve, you have the opportunity to unpack your resonance and say, okay, where could I be off? Am I truly owning my full authentic self at this place? Because authenticity is iterative. We change with the seasons, we change with the years. So it's an iterative process of allowing our authentic self to be expressed. Or is it congruence? Am I hiding pieces of myself? Or is it alignment? I'm not talking to the right people. I'm not in the right field. I'm in the wrong relationship. Who knows what it might be, which lever of yours is active. But ultimately, understanding what resonance feels like and what it feels like when it's not in flow is what helps us excavate what needs to be changed. So as we went into a year, 2023, that was going to be all about resonance, I know that and I can own this fully, naively came into it saying, this is great. You know, as long as we're walking the ACAR path, doing our work on our authentic selves, showing up congruently, aligned in the right places, we should experience a year of a lot of flow. By about February of 2023, what I realized is the reverse was going to be absolutely true as well. So what you just spoke to, Priscilla, is so prescient and so astute, which is the places where you had not claimed resonance for yourself, where you had not made the bold step, where you had not courageously come into alignment, the universe was going to do it for you this year. So if you've been denying your money picture, you're probably going to see a whole lot of truth about your money that needed to be addressed. If there were undercurrents in your marriage or key relationships that were not in alignment with you, probably going to have some relationship stuff coming up. If there are undercurrents to your health and well-being that you've kind of been pushing back, probably going to be speaking up. So a lot of inflammation showed itself. And look, here we are in a year where there's inflation, so inflating prices, increased interest rates, inflammation in the form of war and escalation of long-term conflict, rising inflammation in our physical bodies, a lot of post-COVID going on, which largely has to do with inflammation. So there was a lot inflamed to be seen, and the universe started making decisions for us. It's even more of a call to action to really understand what resonance is and to walk that ACAR model so you can avoid that discomfort of the universe stepping in and doing it for you. Through the lens of the mystic, through the lens of the almanac, everything you said about potential for 2024 is true. Potentiality is something you really want to get familiar with because you want to look at the places where you yourself are putting the foot on the brake of what's possible for you. This is going to be a year where possibilities open up. But before that, the collective is having quite a bit of a wake-up call. Through the lens of the mystic path, 2024 is the year of the wake-up call. It's the year of seeing what cannot be unseen anymore. So the good news for your audience, you have all been ahead of your time for a really long time. You have all been seeing things long before the collective could see or own them. You've been feeling the urgency in your cells and in your body. You've been doing deep healing work and alignment work for a long time. So what this group, your audience, has been feeling is almost the burnout, exhaustion, and disillusionment of having been ahead of your time. So for a lot of your audience, 2024 will feel like the year of possibility. 2024 is going to feel like, oh, people are waking up around me. People are going to be like, oh yeah, the climate really is a deal. Oh yeah, we have huge political divides. Oh yeah, we have deep-seated religious divides that we have to address. We have a history of intolerance throughout humanity. So people are going to be waking up to these things that your audience has been aware of for a really long time. So this year of the wake-up call is going to be really uncomfortable for people who have wanted to stay asleep or who have wanted to avert their eyes. But for people who have been eyes wide open, aligning to their purpose, doing their healing work, a wake-up call is a wake-up call to potential, a wake-up call to possibility. A dear friend and mentor of mine just this week spoke these words. She said, we have to remain open to the possibility that all possibilities are possible. And I love that little riddle, because what we're trying to remind ourselves is that pathways we maybe can't see right now, doorways to peace that maybe we don't even think exist, all of these things can be possible when we allow for the intersection of not just history, not just intellect, not just academic pathways, traditional pathways, but when we invite in the ancestors, our intuitive side, our energetic side, our emotional literacy and awareness, our Akashic understandings, our soul archetypes, when we invite these in to balance all those other factors, we actually create possibility and potential where it appeared there were none. We open up something that on the mystic's path we call the third door, which is a door to what we might not have even seen. Between the binary of yes, no, right, wrong, exists this third door through which we find resonance, we find peacemaking, we find opportunity for healing that we maybe didn't even think existed. So in order to really be aligned to 2024, you really want to track what the universe showed you in 2023. Unpack what happened in your 3 transformational levers. What has your health been showing you? What has your heart been showing you? What have your bank accounts, your prosperity been showing you? Where could you be more honest, authentic, congruent, and aligned to your own truth? And then how can you bring that more congruently into how you show up in the world? If you're doing that work and you're allowing yourself to be fully present and aware, what you're going to find is 2024 actually is an opportunity for that third door where you can invite in even more resonance and even more flow than certainly we've experienced as a collective since at least 2015.
Thank you for that really comprehensive navigation of the collective energies. And for me, certainly all 3 levers were activated: money primarily, then relationship, and then health.
Yeah.
And you've heard them because we worked together for a portion of this year. And I remember early on this year when I had a really potent reading with the Ascended Masters, one of the most potent I've ever had. And they said, in terms of my marriage, where I had abdicated, this was the word, abdication of my power and responsibility around my financial independence, and my husband's abdication of his role as in the fullness of his potential as a partner. And in that moment of hearing the word abdication, I was like, oh my goodness, there was such a rumble that I felt. And I think many of us are in this denial, coming to terms with where we've abdicated power, sovereignty, potential, possibility,
Mm-hmm.
truths. and seeing how that's rippled potentially into the other levers, right? If
Yes.
it's in relationships, where have you been denying the truth, and how's that been affecting your health and how you feel,
Yep.
how you show up, and then money, and seeing all that coherent interconnectedness between the three transformational levers of health, money, and relationships. And it brings me to what we talked about in June towards affluence, which was an awareness that I had of such a core energetic piece that I didn't realize I had diminished or cut myself off of. And just last week, as I'm putting the pieces of Soulfluent Affluent leadership together that was given to me in the records, affluence is defined as affluence comes from Latin, from the verb affluere, which means to flow abundantly, right? To be in abundant supply and abundant flow. So it's in everything, in flux, in come, in flow, in all of that, right?
Yep.
And as we denied this morning, actually during a theta healing, they were like, you've done so much excavation of your vessel of the old stuff. So
Yep.
now there is room. And so for the people listening, notice, where is there now room and capacity to receive the inflow of all those things that are wanting to come, as you said, from the potential and possible places that we may not perceive or imagine yet, right? And so the more that we get to allow for affluence, and affluence is not about, and then as you were talking to about your ACAR model and self-expression, in my terminology, in my world around affluence, affluence is really is defined by the Soulfluent work as this abundant flow of self-expression, of soulful expression in everything you do, right? So it speaks to authenticity. It speaks to honoring the energies that you maybe hadn't even realized that are such a key part of you, like breathing. It might
Yes.
mean acknowledging that there are certain standards and boundaries. I was given like the affluence matrix, that of 4 pillars of core affluent leadership, and standards and boundaries are one of them. We talk about standards and boundaries, but have we really looked at what are the standards that we uphold for ourselves? What are the boundaries that we hold true? And this has nothing to do with, this is truly about what works, right? And I posted on Facebook yesterday about how, it's like, oh, I've got to have better standards. How we demand better standards from our leaders. We demand so much more from others. And yet the call, as always, is to start with ourselves and ask ourselves, what are the standards that we hold for our health, for our money, for our right livelihood, for our relationships? And so where can we make those upgrades that create deeper authenticity and alignment within ourselves, so that then we can embody that and then be that expression for the world, and how we receive the world in turn, to create more of that generative open flow as we move forward. So it's fascinating how all the pieces
Yep.
come together. And the third door is the yes and, right?
Mhm.
It's like having your cake and eating it too. It's not saying it has to be an either or. That's the beauty of bringing all of ourselves to the table, of creating paradigm shifts, of thinking of other solutions. It's and shifting consciousness, because we get to see and perceive, know and believe and act on the yes and, not just the either or. It has to be this way or that way. And I loved your Mystic Society post on peacemaking, chewing, grounding. I was like, there's so many different ways that we can do peacemaking. And all of this comes back to, how can we be the change through our own internal calibration, our own internal sense of peace and self-acceptance and healing, right? And there's always going to be work for us to do, but if there's deeper work that is required, let's do the healing for ourselves, so that then we
Right.
can be that healer
Absolutely.
for others and not collapse. Do you have any, amidst all the inflammation that you described so beautifully for now, for people, especially mystics, we're empathic, right? We're sponges. We feel things from everyone. Do you have a particular tool or suggestion for people on how to stay in their own lane energetically, and not be, collapse into the grief and the chaos of the world and spin out of control?
Absolutely. In fact, I'll provide you with a graphic that you can share with your audience. But one of the key pathways to that third door and to maintaining our deep roots and grounding in this kind of time of chaotic energies is to really seek peace from within and to cultivate and craft core routines around peace for yourself. So anything that you're already doing that supports grounding and embodiment, whether that's meditation, whether that's sit spot, which is basically taking your presence practice outside into nature. It could be yoga practice, Pilates, like whatever it is that for you helps you quiet all the outside noise and brings you to your center is just perfect. But ultimately, when we unpack peacemaking, there's four primary directions of almost anything. But when applied to peacemaking, we look at our inner, outer, higher, and lower. And it's really important to kind of tease those out because a lot of times we find ourselves strong in one area and less strong in other areas. So you might have really, really strong peacemaking skills within yourself, right? Self-compassion, self-love, your own meditation practice. But you may struggle to bring that into your relationships or into your workplace. And so that's the intersection of the inner and the outer peacemaking trying to come into unity. Similarly, peacemaking with the higher, when we're living in times like this where there's genuine hardships, not just out there in the world, but literally in your own family unit, within yourself, it can be hard to understand how the universe would allow for such atrocities. We look at what's going on with the war that broke out over the last couple of weeks, and it's creating fracture between people and their picture of what a benevolent universe could be, between them and what their picture of a benevolent God might be. So to come into peacemaking with the higher level, that higher level of peacemaking may have to do with your prayer practice. It might have to do with your intention setting. It might have to do with your understanding of manifestation so that you can come into peace with the reality of the chaotic world that we're in without abdicating or spiritual bypassing, but really, really using your higher self to tap into peacemaking as well. And then the part that nobody ever wants to look at is the lower of peacemaking. And we are actually experiencing so much of the shadow right now. We're looking at years of oppression. We're looking at oppressive systems in the form of late stage capitalism, racism, sexism, patriarchy, right? So in order to really excavate that, you have to be willing to do the work of peacemaking that exists on that below plane, that lower plane, which is how do you start to speak the unspoken? What does mediation need to look like? How can we do forgiveness work, shadow work, trauma work? All of this has to exist too. So understanding those four dimensions of peacemaking ultimately will help you come into deeper peace within yourself, your outer realm, your higher realm, and your lower realm. And I'll just link this back to 2024 and say, when we did the divination in terms of the oracle cards for 2024, we always have what's called an altar card, and that is kind of the leading energy for the year. And next year's altar card is the below card. And this is a card that tends to cause people to contract. There are three primary energies that have people, orient towards fear. That would be the fear card, the unseen card, but also the below card. So whenever we see any of those three cards, we always pull a clarifying card so we can understand, okay, well, what are these energies in service towards? So when we saw the below card as the overarching theme for 2024, we say, well, first, what is the shadow and the light of that card? The shadow is, it can be scary for people. Going into the roots, going into the shadow, going into excavating trauma, that can be a lot for people. But it also, what's the light or the medicine that comes from the below card? This is where we put our roots down. This is where we grow new seeds. This is how we ground ourselves. So the clarifying card for the below card next year, interestingly enough, is our right livelihood. So this is saying, in service to going down into our roots, the courage to go down into the below actually will align you to the reason that you're on the planet, to why you came in this time in the first place. I believe there are no mistakes and there are no coincidences. You are here on this planet right here, right now for a reason. even with the hard stuff that we face, even for the challenges of our lives. I'm a person who lives with chronic illness, who has children affected by chronic illness, have absolutely experienced the impacts of that across all three of my transformational levers. So I am not trying to sweep any of that under the rug or minimize any of the pain or challenge that goes along with those things. But it's what we do with them. It's how they're meant to serve our soul purpose and how we can help heal the collective and others. It's what we do with it. So a long-winded answer to your question of what can we do to better align, get really familiar with what peacemaking looks like, all dimensions, the shadow and the light of it, and see how you can begin to embody and integrate that for the self, because you will then model that and resonate that out throughout all that you touch and throughout our broader collective.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful explanation of peacemaking, because I think sometimes we do feel guilt or we feel powerless, like we wish we could do more. Or, sometimes these last few weeks, I literally have been in my kitchen saying, my biggest problem today is that I'm tired and I don't want to walk my dog, and I have more work on my to-do list, but I'm happy, I'm healthy, I don't have crises and war next to me. Thankfully, we don't
Right.
have fires right now either.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and so it is such a contrast to think that somebody right now is in the line in Palestine hoping for a slice of bread, when I can
Yep.
go to the store and literally like have cartfuls of bread, right? Technically speaking.
Yep.
So how do we reconcile these immense contrasts without losing our balance, right?
Yeah.
Because that won't
Yes.
serve anyone.
How do you not avert your eyes? Because again, year of the wake up call, we must see, we must acknowledge, we must bear witness, but doing so in service to a collective good, not into more paralysis, more fight or flight, more freeze response, more fracture. So it's striking a balance, and it's putting on your own oxygen mask. It's creating the core routines that help serve you and your grounding and balance. And then it's showing up in whatever way you can from that place of leadership, that place of integration, that place of resources. If you can show up from those places, you are impacting the world positively. And that puts a really positive exchange in motion for others then to do the same.
Yes, I completely agree. Is there any additional tip for those of us who, I mean, everything you said is very pertinent to us mystics. Is there anything else that you feel is required to share or add in terms of, given that we are mystics, we are the bridges between the seen and the unseen, right? The visible and the invisible energies. Um, Anything else to
Absolutely.
mention?
Absolutely. There's always one thing I say when I get asked this question, and that is to recenter ourselves on gratitude. And gratitude has, let me say first, I always answer this question this way. I'm actually going to add a second answer that I don't usually say because I feel like it's so important at this moment in time. But this first one, gratitude, it became such a buzzword that I think people have begun to really tune out gratitude as a practice, metaphysical, literal, psychological, emotional. But I just want to encourage people to return to the knowing, something we've been taught by our elders, our wisdom keepers, our medicine people, our ancestors, and that is the word spoken before all else should be gratitude. So identify where you can come back into gratitude despite whatever hardship is going on in your body, in your world, in our collective spaces. Identify those somatic pieces of gratitude where you feel it in yourselves versus where you think about being grateful. Because if you can anchor into those moments of gratitude and string them together, you create a resonance of things to be grateful for. That's an opportunity and a possibility for healing. I am in my 14th year of a daily public gratitude practice that I share in our app, the Mystics Almanac app on Facebook and Instagram, where I seek to identify one moment of gratitude from each day. People sometimes look at that and project that I am living a perfect life, right? What I try to remind people is this is my homework. This is my work. This is my commitment to myself. Because I am a pessimist by nature, I'm a melancholic by nature. I can be super blue when impacted by what's going on in the world. And so my medicine has been to center myself at some point in the day on gratitude and to hopefully model that for others. So if I were to say one thing for someone, it would be revisit your gratitude practice. It can be tiny, just the word of thanks. It can be more extended, meditations of gratitude. It can be a core routine like sharing gratitude at the dinner table. Whatever it is for you, if you can bring it in within yourself, you'll begin to create it within the collective. But I'm going to add the second part of the answer because right now, especially for your audience, especially for those who are tuned into the energetics, the more subtle themes, who are feelers and seers of our time, it's to support yourself and others with hope. Because right alongside possibility is the reality that we have to be able to believe it could be true. We have to be able to believe in the possibility. We have to have hope. So when we're facing the below card, we're facing this year of the wake-up call, a year of potential and possibility, we also have to remind ourselves that there's hope. So whatever you can do to keep hope alive in yourself, read the inspirational stories, read stories of triumph, read the stories of the great peacemakers throughout history. And then hopefully you will also supply those around you with hope because we need each other. We need to link arms. On a day where Priscilla might be feeling there's no hope given what's going on in her world of the world, hopefully I could bring some hope and bolster, and vice versa. When I'm having a moment of loss of hope, Priscilla can say, this is what we know to be true. Let's center on gratitude. Let's continue to see that third door and create that bridge to peace. So in addition to gratitude, I would say anything you can do to keep hope alive within yourself and share it with those around you is going to be a key to aligning ourselves in a good way going forward.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. So that felt experience anchored in and strung together of gratitude and supporting each other through hope, believing in the possibility and the potential. Yeah,
Absolutely.
very good. All right. So unless there's anything else you feel compelled to share, I'd love to go into the 5-question rapid fire on leadership. This is fun, like a word or a sentence, super fast. Okay.
Yep.
What's your definition of leadership?
Integrity.
What's your leadership edge right now? What's stretching you?
Redefining capacity. How much capacity I want to align to different facets in my life. That's my edge.
What's your Soulfluent leadership archetype?
Well, I can tell you all of them resonate for me, as I'm sure it does with your audience, because we are so multifaceted, but at such a sweet spot in my heart for the mystic.
Yes. And by the way, I forgot to mention that Lindsay wrote the foreword to the Soulfluent Leadership Business Guide. Duh. We were talking, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And how has being a mystic informed your work and allowed you to embrace your natural leadership abilities?
Oh my goodness. One of the beautiful things about your book and about the archetypes, and part of why I recommend it as a resource and a guide truly for my clients, is because the more you know yourself, the more you can grant yourself permission to stand in your strength and your truth. So knowing yourself and standing in your truth when it comes to being a mystic or a feeler or a seer is all about permission granting too. That there is nothing wrong with you, and quite the opposite. Your sensitivities are your superpower, your ability to feel. So what I did or attempted to do as a child to turn those gifts off, to numb myself, to not feel, right, is the exact antithesis of what we do when we step into our leadership, or what these archetypes will help support you in doing. So for me, it's balancing out that intellect, that academic, that very what we call practical side, and recognizing that the future definition of knowing is the intersection of intellect and intuition. So to be a part of that movement, to allow for the subtle sides, the subtle feeling, the emotional literacy, and the intuition, it's a blessing to be on the planet to get to anchor those energies.
That is beautiful. Thank you. Next question. What's been your greatest life or leadership lesson that you carry with you?
My greatest life or leadership lesson. This takes us down a little bit different path, but what I will say is a core framework that I use in teaching to write Livelihood is something called the life wheel. You've probably been exposed to it in different ways, but it's essentially a way to look at all the different holistic facets of yourself. And one of the primary things that I learned and that I tried to guide others to see as well through being a mirror and a reflection is we have a desire typically and an instinct to want to hide or amputate or put away the thing that's been most challenging or the least pleasurable for us. So for me, the corporate world, all the toxicity that went along with like hyper masculine toxic capitalism, I wanted to pretend like that wasn't even on my wheel. I see this all the time with clients. I don't want to own that I had a bankruptcy, or I've moved beyond that divorce, or whatever the shadow might be. But the real medicine in resonance is when you actually transmute those energies and fully claim all parts of your journey. Once you do that, your resonance just takes off exponentially. So one of the greatest things I learned is don't amputate those edgier parts of yourself. Bring them forward, shine the light on them, allow for them to be transmuted into healing and to gifts, and they will ultimately uncover your superpower.
Thank you. Yeah, that was brought to my attention very recently too. And there's no charge, right? You've
Right.
integrated it.
Yep.
Last question. What's your favorite leadership quality?
My favorite leadership quality, I guess, would have to be resonance. It would be integrity. I think we all know what it's like to see someone who's out of their integrity, maybe still giving the talk, sharing the framework, but not living it themselves. So they're no longer resonant. And we also know what that feels like in ourselves when we're not walking our talk. So I think, yeah, to say my favorite would probably be someone who is fully integrated and aligned to their resonant truth.
Thank you for sharing so openly and transparently, Lindsay. We've made it to the end. Look at that, time went by so quickly. I encourage people to learn more about the Mystic Society at mysticsociety.com or at lindsaypera.com. It'll be in the email as well for people to connect with you. The 2024 Almanac, Mystics Almanac comes out early release in November.
Yeah, in November. Yep.
Yes.
But they can download the app now and they'll be a part of the launch and you'll have access to all the resources as well. So,
The Mystics Almanac app, right?
yep,
It's a
yep,
free app.
yep.
Brings your management consulting, your tech, financial, all of that into your. I love that how you're so multifaceted. Gratitude for you, for your leadership, for your mysticism, for your all of your goodness and your magic, Lindsay. It's an honor to walk beside you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom today and all your gifts. And let's see what possibilities are afoot, and let's stay believing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much, my love. Thank you.